The global music world hit its rock bottom when, at age 75,
When Rieu, the king of the waltz, died in the middle of a performance when he was 75 years old, the world of music hit rock bottom. After that, everything changed. But what caused him to fall apart when he was at the peak of his powers? For us to understand, we need to know what happened in his life. Rieu was born on October 1, 1949, into a family that valued discipline over a child's happiness. He was the third of 6 children, and his father ruled the house with a stick as harshly as he ruled the stage. There was another Andre in his family. His dad was a famous director that orchestras looked up to, but kids feared him at home. No one laughed or sang songs in their house. Love was vague and not warm. Later, Andre would say, "My parents didn't love me." He didn't say this to hurt feelings, but to quietly admit the truth. His mom was crazy about skills and grades. She thought that fantasy was a bad thing. When his art teacher praised it, it was yelled back at him through the house as if it were a charge. The creative urge was a sign of weakness, not strength. But everything changed when he turned 5. An 18-year-old girl who was slim and graceful took him in. She was his first teacher for the piano. She didn't tell him off. She got him to feel. Young Andre learned something he didn't know in her bow's sweep. Freedom, love and romance were not there. There was only a tremor that sounded like living. It was clear that he was amazed. Then he became interested in music. That powerful feeling wasn't success, it was the beginning of something deep inside him. Other kids worked on scales. He was looking for rapport, but happiness came at a price. In his teens, his growing love for waltzes met with his strict father's strictness. The poetry of bows was looked down upon at home. His dad yelled at him, "I didn't teach you how to play waltzes." Those words were not only mean to style, they wanted to kill his spirit. When Marjorie showed up around 1968, it was the last blow to his soul. Not a conductor's score, but Andre's chosen friend. His mother was very angry when she saw her. She told them to leave. Rejection on top of rejection. That very night, Andre left. He didn't go back. Their house stayed the same. His rise to fame left him like an empty shell. His parents didn't come to any of his shows. Not once. Even when he was in a stadium full of screaming fans, he couldn't get rid of the image of the quiet at home. "I went to therapy for years trying to figure out why my childhood felt so empty," he once said. The cheers never filled that hole, but music made him feel seen for the first time. The violin wasn't just a toy, it was a way of life. Window would open when he played. After years of official orchestral testing and listening to the empty echoes of concert halls, Andre broke away and began the rebellion in 1978. He got the Maastricht Salon Orchestra going. With a lot of hope, 12 dreams who aren't dressed up. These young dreams were putting on shows in small community halls, backyard parties, and border towns that no one remembered. The music was played just because it was music. There are no judges or big stages, just music, shared, and people. That was all on the outside. On the inside, though, there was someone else running everything. Josie was there. She was steady, accurate, and couldn't be seen. She took care of business meetings, bookings, and plans for ghostwriting. She was the unseen power that made his magic work. As he thought about buying a house that was falling apart, she made a joke: sell more records, not because he was interested or curious, but to build the future. This peaceful revolt wasn't shown on TV, it got out. In 1987, he officially started the Johann Strauss Orchestra, which has 12 players and a radical goal to bring music's heartbeat back. They gave up being serious and formal. They wore colored coats instead of black ones. Invite happiness. Their debut on January 1, 1988 was exciting, with lights that danced and music that made people laugh. Even though critics laughed at them, the crowds loved them. They weren't going to a show. They took back the music. By 1995, there was a sudden change at the UEFA Champions League final in Vienna, which was one of the biggest events in Europe. Rieu walked onto the field with his band. Football fans stopped, moved, and clapped as Shostakovich Waltz Untold rose to the top. The stadium was filled with ease, and the stress of sports had been melted away by strain. It felt like the end of the world when Ajax scored. The event went down in history. Strauss and his band went straight to #1 in the Netherlands and stayed there for 19 weeks. That had never been done before in classical music. It moved millions around the world. Australia came next right away. More than 38,000 people packed into a stadium in Melbourne to see a fairy tale come true. Plus, 8 of the top 10 DVDs in the country were there. He owned every one of them. He was right there with Pink and AC/DC, 2 big names in pop music. Even after all his success, some people still didn't like what he was doing. The conservative was the one who backed away. One director made fun of lights and gowns and musical pornography, saying that joy had no place in art. For Rieu's fans, though, it meant everything. Grandparents who were crying while dancing had found their stage. He really meant it when he said that with us, you don't feel the serious hush that makes people want to leave. He wasn't trying to sell shows. People were getting hope from him. Even though the venues were packed, the maestro was having a breakdown behind the bright lights. In 2010, when he was at the top of his game, a new issue came up. Andre got a virus that spread to his inner ear and made him sick. It's very important for violinists to be balanced. His world turned upside down, and tours and events had to be cancelled. The man who was most interesting when he said, "Kendo," had to say, "I can't." It wasn't just sickness. He didn't know he had an injury until it showed up. To be more exact, it wasn't just sickness. It was the moment when a story fell apart, showing itself in shaky balance and fuzzy reflection. Andre Rieu died in 2010 at the age of 62 from a virus that infected his vestibular nerve. This was an attack on his inner ear that made him constantly crazy. The room was spinning, and nothing was stable. Not even the ground below him. He was lying in bed, his eyes spinning as he looked at the walls that were moving very quickly. The man who had never moved felt like he had no place to stand. Doctors told people to rest. The tour plans fell apart, and the man who used to be as stiff as a cement wall broke down like cheap sheet music. Andres took a long time to get better. All types of standard treatment did not work. Then a fan from Australia wrote a letter. He wrote about his own experience with the same sickness and gave exercises that helped him get his balance back. Andres was desperate, so he did what the man said. The warping stopped slowly over time. After staying away for months, he stood up again, at first shakily and then in a strong way. He finally went back on stage after some time, leading a tour that was both a musical and a reputational comeback. When he healed, no wound, physical or mental, goes away completely. Everyone thought he was back to being himself again. The dizziness went away, but his balance was still unstable. In 2012, management quickly denied that imbalance problems had come back, but they did admit that the ear was still a weak spot after being hit. There was also a chance that he would get sick again, which put him in great danger, especially if he was on stage. Then 2016 came along. The bell of hopelessness went off again in Leeds during a tour in December. Andre had a friend that he held very close to his heart. He always came along. His name was Rieu Disappearance, and he played the trombone of many years. It was strange that he had died in his sleep while everyone else was busy with their own things. In Andres's world, it was like a big explosion. He quickly cancelled the show in Nottingham in the middle of the tour, and then stopped the rest in London, Birmingham, and Glasgow. It wasn't sickness. It was unquenchable sadness that had no end. He said he felt like a brother later. The orchestra, which was like a family, moved in sadness. When the music shows came back, they reminded Andres of what had been missing in his life. Even after all of that, he stayed strong, and in 2019, when he had a terrible flu that made him sweat and give him a fever, he took the stage. On stage, he kept the smile, but people who knew him well could see that it was making him fight with himself. Then came the stage that would break him. In Mexico City in March 2024, he had to play at 6 shows that were all sold out. It looked like a good win. Just after the second show, sharpness changed to crisis. The flu, altitude, and jet lag all came together like storm clouds. Backstage, he was said to have stumbled. Fever and being unable to breathe. He quietly picked up the phone and called Marjorie. "I never want my first music day to be like this again." That was how 4 concerts finished. Over 40,000 people who had tickets were very angry. The 125 people in the orchestra were sent home in the middle of their trip. Flights changed, and tickets were returned. There was emergency chaos, and they had no way to keep their quiet respect. Something new took place during that pause. Pierre, his son, stepped forward. He was no longer just a son or tour manager. He turned into a shield. There will be no more races across oceans. The speed dropped. Performances only in Europe. Schedules that are managed. Rest. Get better. It was like a soft fortress built around André's health. It wasn't a getaway. It was the right move. But if it had been taken a little earlier, they wouldn't have had to deal with what was going to happen next. At the moment, Pierre was in charge of everything. The person who used to be in charge of operations was now in charge of tempo. He put brakes in places where André would have pushed forward hard. Now, every trip and event went through a filter. Is it possible for him to do this? By taking on the weight, he let André get back to making music, but not at the cost of himself. Everything was changed by that collapse in choice. It wasn't the fall of a great musician. It was the start of something new. Someone who knew that, to play a note well, you had to work for it, not just keep playing it over and over again. And in that way, he became more real and memorable. The change could be seen by the summer of 2024, but not all the scars were completely healed. It cost André Rieu, who is now 75 years old, a lot to slow down. He had built his life on the road. Moving all the time had been his breath for decades. Now that Pierre had tightened the ropes, the pressure for each performance was different. He felt like he had to show that he could still do it. Not only for the crowd, but also for himself. In July of that year, he went back to Maastricht, which was his home stage. It was the safest place on his schedule. The one place where everyone knew something about the man's past. As they had for years, the shows sold out right away. But behind the scenes, getting ready wasn't the same as usual. Medical clearances, the availability of oxygen backstage, and breaks for rest are all written into the practice blocks. His team used to focus on sound balance and lighting cues, but now they work with doctors and physical therapists. The crowd never saw the list that was stuck to the wall of his dressing room. His body was no longer the silent partner it used to be, and he knew it. The list was clear and not very long. Keep yourself hydrated before going on stage, and don't shake hands after the show until your heart rate has settled. Pierre followed these rules with the same level of gravity that his father used to show the tempo. But even with the safety nets in place, the old pace tried to get through at times. On the third night in Maastricht, he played a waltz longer than planned, and the swell of strings made it hard to hear. After the music, everyone stood up, and it seemed like a long time ago for a short time. But when he left the stage, his shirt felt heavy and damp, just like it did in Mexico City. Pierre's face said what neither of them wanted to say out loud. They were almost over the line that was still there. Not only were changes made to the body, but also to the art. André started moving some pieces around, making the music less intense in ways that only trained ears could hear. There were fewer of the high-energy polkas. Ballads, slower waltzes, and instrumental stories started to take over the set lists. Fans liked the change, but they didn't know it was also a plan. It was a way to make it look like they had endless energy without using as much to do it. He spent more time at home between shows than he had in decades. He practiced in Maastricht's stone streets and the yard behind his home from the 1400s. He didn't practice for hours with the whole group. Instead, he practiced alone to keep his energy up for days when he had to play. Friends noticed that his voice had a softer beat. He wasn't calling as late at night, and he was more willing to say no. The cheers were different when André Rieu came back on stage after a long illness. It was more than just a party. It felt good. It had been months since the last show by the King of the Waltz. In 2009, he got a virus that stopped him in the middle of his tour. Doctors told him that his career could end if he pushed too soon. André never thought about giving up singing, though. Antwerp was the site of the first show. Before he got sick, all the tickets were gone. Many thought the show would be shorter. Rieu instead played music for 3 hours straight without skipping a beat. He greeted his audience with the same friendly warmth, but a careful watcher could see that things had changed. He sat in the middle of the pieces. He took his time, and his son Pierre was seen off to the side for the whole show for the first time in decades. You already know that Pierre Rieu had been running the business quietly while his father was sick. He was in charge of the production, the schedules, and the decision about whether the show would even go on. He could now be seen as a safety net for the show. In later talks, André said Pierre was told to step in right away if he started to feel dizzy. There was a lot of duty. It wasn't just music. It was about his dad's health. In the middle of the 2010 tour, something special happened that fans still talk about. During the encore in Maastricht, André stopped and called Pierre to the front of the stage. The crowd cheered when Pierre reluctantly took the stage. He was given a microphone by André and told to sing along with the musicians. People didn't care that Pierre wasn't a trained singer. People from all over the world could see a rare glimpse into their close relationship. The video clip went viral online very quickly and showed a side of André that was not often seen in talks. Not the music teacher, but the dad. Behind the scenes, things were still moving very quickly. To help André get better, they planned their schedules carefully, but traveling meant they didn't have much time to rest. It was really hot in Brazil. Australia had terrible jet lag. André's team changed the set lists so that the hardest numbers were put at the beginning of the show, when he was at his most energetic. There was always a risk even back then. If his illness came back, it could end everything all over again. During those years, Pierre's part got even bigger. He wasn't just in charge of the details. He grew up to be a quiet parent figure, who sometimes went against his dad's gut feelings. André has said that he and Pierre did fight about slowing down, but André knew that his son's carefulness was what kept the tour going. It became clear to fans that André's acting style was changing in small ways. There was more interaction with the audience and more time between pieces for sharing stories. It wasn't just about saving power. André was trying to make his performances feel more personal. He wanted people to feel like they were on the trip with him. All the good times, bad times, fears, and wins. The Rieu machine was back in full swing by 2012. Even though the tours took him to different countries, the illness never really went away. In talks, André was honest about how it had changed him. He no longer thought he was unbeatable. It felt like each show was a gift, not a promise. In terms of money, the return was amazing. The tours brought in a lot of money. More DVDs were sold. Every year, the Maastricht shows became big events in the world of film. But there was a constant balancing act going on behind the results. The need to put on the big show that fans wanted while keeping the man at the center of it all safe. Even more could be seen of Pierre's impact in business choices. He talked with sites about giving the orchestra more time to practice without having to rush. He demanded that medical staff be at every show, no matter where it was held. What would happen when André could no longer tour on this scale was something he rarely talked about in public. He started getting ready for it. There were times when André brushed off the idea of slowing down, but people who knew him well saw the signs. The trips were still huge, but there were a little more time between them. The schedule gave people more time to recover. Instead of an escape, it was a way to stay safe. Still, the requests wouldn't go away. In 2016, there were more than 100 acts on the schedule. That meant he had to travel a lot, deal with changes in the weather, and lead an orchestra in several countries, which was hard on his mind. Fans could only see the shine in the music. When the lights went out, they didn't see how tired they were. Afterward, there was an event during a European tour. It wasn't shocking enough to make the news, but it was important. André took longer than usual breaks between songs during a show in Vienna, getting closer to the stage to watch. There was a change in the air, but the music kept going. André later said that he had felt dizzy during that set. Even though the show was over, they both remembered it, which meant that risk was always there, no matter how careful they were. For Pierre, It made him more determined to keep his promise to protect his father without showing the world his flaws. The next year, André cut back on some of the show's active parts. He gave his orchestra players more tasks to do. He gave them short breaks so he could rest without stopping the flow of the show, and encouraged them to play solos. People really liked it. They thought it was kind. It was also a plan for André, but the changes didn't mean giving up. In 2019, more people than ever before came to the Maastricht events. André stood there with a smile on his face and bowed his head, surrounded by thousands of people singing along. In that moment, his career could have come to an end, but he wasn't done. The trip stopped all at once when the pandemic hit in 2020. While he was an adult, André had never taken such a long break from performance. He spent it practicing, recording, and keeping in touch with his musicians. But he also used the time to think. The forced break showed him what life might be like if he didn't have to travel all the time. When the limits were lifted, he went back on stage with more energy than before. More people showed up, they were louder, and they were stronger. People had missed live music. André missed them more than he told them. In recent years, the tours have kept going, but with changes based on what people have learned from the past. The plans are better thought out. The trip is planned to be as easy as possible. Pierre stays by his side for almost all of his performances, still watching and ready. He is now 75 years old. He still plays with the same fire that made him famous all over the world. But people who know about his past know how important each note is. Every show he puts on is a victory over the illness that almost made him unable to speak. But there is one thing that André hasn't told the public about his choice that could make everything different. Someone close to the team recently overheard André and Pierre talking about the possibility of one last, biggest world tour. There are no dates set yet. They haven't said much about it. But if it happens, it will test everything they've made. The music, the strength, and the bond between a dad and his son. It's not a question of whether Orr can do it for the first time since his return. If he should,